gallery, please note that we're about to commence recording this meeting. Your video and audio will be recorded and live streamed from now onwards. So welcome to the guests or the visitors today, and Kathy, a dissertation later. I'll declare the meeting open and read the civic prayer. Almighty God, help us to duly and faithfully carry out our numerous duties to the best of our judgment and ability for the advancement of this district and the benefit of all whom we are here to serve. And the Coorong District Council acknowledges the traditional owners of the land on which we meet. Thank you. Item 1 is apologies. We have none. Item 2, acknowledgements. I think we've inserted this in the agenda line in case councillors, we've been debating about acknowledging well-known or perhaps previous councillors. This is a spot on the agenda at this stage where we think that could be. Not that we're aware of any today, unless someone is. We thought we'd give that a trial. Confirmation of minutes. Item 2 on the agenda for the meeting of 21st of July 2020. Someone, this counts. I'm going to call over here.
I'm happy to move.
Happy to move that one. I've got 2 over there, and Councillor Qualman second. Councillor Jens, you've got your hand up for some reason.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'll be voting against. The previous meeting when I moved an amendment, I would have believed that the full amendment would have been recorded in full, as I did move it. Councillor Lee did second. It has been referred to in the minutes of the meeting in a tertiary couple of lines. It is, I think, it leaves question as to what was actually going on. Because I moved the motion and you accepted that, I believe it should be there in full, including the fact that you disallowed the amendment.
So you are challenging my judgment of that amendment?
No, I am challenging the manner in which it is recorded.
I would understand that we don't record things that I don't allow.
It was moved and seconded, Mr. Mayor.
So, Councillor, since you raised it with some other people, the meeting has been reviewed, the recording, as it can be nowadays, as people are doing. You moved an amendment and gave reasons for a different split, which I declined to accept your amendment because it was substantively different to the motion that was already on the table. I at no time, in my view, accepted a seconding from Councillor Ling.
That's right, Mr. Mayor, but then I will.
So I think it's pedantic, to be quite honest, because as you would note, that first motion was lost, and then you had the opportunity to move a motion which I believe was probably going to be the same as your amendment, which was also lost. So I believe the meeting took full aspect of all parts of it and ended up in a third motion which allocated the money. So you're entitled to vote against the minutes if you wish. I don't know why, but you can. Any other points of order? Any other discussion around the minutes? Because there shouldn't be. There being none, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried. It's carried at 7-2 with Councillors Lang and Jens voting against the confirmation of the minutes. Adjourned business, there seems to be new. Item 3, minute action list. Item 4, any questions from council members regarding the minute action list? Councillor Roundtree.
Just on O2719, points 3 and 4, it's been marked as done. I'm just wondering whether points 3 and 4 are actually done, or whether it should stay as a live motion. I believe 3 and 4 are done on that list.
House.
So number 2719, that is point 3, the report into the electrical safety issues. I don't think that's been completed, has it?
That's part of the funding project.
Okay, so it was done.
It's in the process of being done.
Okay, so we mark them as complete when they're still
We'll
going?
start the
Okay,
process.
so I'm doing that. And then number 4 was only a provisional report was provided. And a more detailed report will need to be pending the outcome of the community vision consultation. So I thought maybe that one should possibly still remain open unless someone's reading that.
It can be councillor Roundtree, but it's in progress. It's not like it's, I suppose it's a decision about whether we leave here until things are completed or the chamber is confident that things have started and that we will come back with the report. So it's up to the chamber.
Only reason I like them staying open when they're open is that it reminds me to keep thinking about them, looking at them. Otherwise, they just sort of disappear off my thought list. So that would be the only reason. It's just that keeps it as in front of mind. Thank you, councillor.
I want to hire up this council there.
Sorry? No, I agree that it's in the drought funding, and I'm in discussions with the CEO now that with the community plan, the community consultation, which may or may not perhaps include that at that time, or separate consultation subject to the COVID rules, etc. on Bodmore House.
So, minute action list, councillors. Councillor Arthur, you were
Yes.
debating, you want to say something?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I've got some that have actually dropped off the list and I think we should not have. 43019 is regarding the future information station and railway museum. Part of the motion was schedule a meeting with Taliban Information Association to undertake a transition of financial obligation and determine the most appropriate use of the profitable funds. Now, we've been told it's been looked at, but it hasn't been done. And what is the result?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, a meeting was held and discussion was raised about the funds that were essentially left over for this group. And they were making a decision on how best to spend that. And then COVID happened, so we haven't gotten back to see what they determined.
Okay. 39819 is a motion by Councillor Taylor. The council investigate, facilitate and fund the opportunity to qualify volunteers per ward to carry out work-zone traffic management. I suppose COVID-19 stopped that, has it?
That's
But why has it been taken off the action list when it hasn't been done?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, sorry. We've got a volunteer officer now, and she is working with INA to work out how and when these courses can be held for the volunteers to do the
It
traffic
should be
management.
still on our list to be done.
So, back to you, Mayor. Get back to councillor Roundtree's comment then. Process has started. There's nothing to indicate that it won't be. It may be the case that we can train our staff to be volunteers or to be traffic management. It does cost to do that, but we're exploring that, so we can leave that there.
The next one is 05819, which goes back to February 2019. It's the Rung Reserve and Canal Caravan Park, setting up a system there. Now, we were told that's because we didn't have an IT man. We've got one of them now. So, is this a COVID-19 thing too?
No. That's really, Mayor. That's my, I won't say lag, but basically until we fix it up and pool, and then we look at, and I think I've said in this chamber a couple of times, we will then look at what is the best outcome for those two camping facilities. It didn't seem to make sense to rush in to decide we're going to have paid camping there if at the end of the day, if there may be a better option. There are many camping grounds around Australia now that are free of those types, so we haven't done any analysis of whether it would cost us more to actually administer it than it would to collect money. So that's basically been on hold because it hasn't been urgent in that sense. And I acknowledge that's still there, but it's not been done.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, can I just add that yes, we do have an IT man now, but if I actually can't stress enough how busy he is trying to catch up from the period of time we didn't have an IT person and instigating and tidying up a whole lot of things that we're trying to do. He's working a significant amount of overtime every fortnight. So he's not sitting on his hands and just not working with that. He's extremely busy. So yes, we do have an IT man, but he's kind of prioritising.
The next one is 00419. It's also a motion by Councillor Taylor regarding the listing of occupied and unoccupied lands. Have the council now found out what they are owned and under care and control
So, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to say we've got that now, councillor. It has come in a document, a Word document, and so we're going to PDF it first because it really shouldn't be something that's sent out in a document that can be changed. And then we would have to look at whether it's something that is distributed. What are the implications of that? We have to get some advice about whether we can distribute that. What are the privacy issues around that? But we have definitely got it, and we're just having a look at it. It is quite a big document. And we'll take some analysis too, because I don't think it'll be useful for us to send it to you as is, without us understanding it completely. Because you may, I'll sit in the chamber and then ask 15 questions about each particular block of land from you, councillor, before I understand it.
of. It's nice to know we know what
We do got.
we have now.
Oh, yeah.
And the last one is 05719. The Culburra Community Complex Review of Financial Assistance was never brought up in the budget process, so it's missed out on allocation in the budget, so we'll be writing to them telling them it won't be funded in 2020-21.
So I have, for you, Mr. Mayor, I have just an update on that. The Culburra Community Complex, we were actually providing funding for water, power and insurance. We received no request in 2021. Should that be 1920? In 17-18, funding was given at 1,400, 18-19, 1,400, 19-20. We have received no request today. It sounds like, and I haven't checked this, councillor, that we must get it at the beginning of the financial year. We've received nothing from them today.
Well, just with due respect, they didn't apply every year. It was a motion put, and the motion reads, and it was moved by Councillor Yench, seconded by Councillor Roundtree, that the council supports the Culburra Community Complex with a financial contribution of $1,400 for the 2019-20 financial year to assist them with payment of operational overheads, water, power and insurance. Point two, that funding for 2020-2021 will be considered upon the further review of the developments at the precinct. So
We haven't done a review of the precinct.
So that doesn't answer my question. Have they missed out on funding, and will we inform them?
I don't know information.
But we need to follow that up, councillor. It seems.
So,
Did they ever ask and we haven't offered? I think would be the short answer. So it needs more work.
There's more work.
When was that? Sorry, that motion just rang out. When was that presented?
2019.
what's that?
What day?
February. The number was 05790.
So when's the work in that, please?
We'll have a look.
Anything else, councillor?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Anyone else? Any action list? There being none, I'll move on to item 5, which is questions with notice. Councillor Roundtree, you have one.
Yes, and also can I get the answer? I've got another question following up from that. So
We'll go to questions without notice then, unless it's on this own agenda item.
No, it's on this agenda item,
Righto.
and I just want the answer recorded. So, council need to recognise there are a number of residents, ratepayers that do not visit the council website frequently, and advertising in that space does limit exposure to some of the locals. I know there were some locals that were keen on that cabin that didn't understand that it was even available to be bidded on. So I just think we need to do perhaps a little bit better job of making sure we get that information out there to the locals. So, especially for the less savvy ones, less tech savvy ones.
That's what you mean.
Mhm.
It has been known in the chamber for quite a time that we were selling that, and I acknowledge, yes, it wasn't widely distributed. There was probably a thought that we weren't confident that we would get very much money for it, and so then you decide on how much you're actually going to spend for any sort of advertising of any sort. Having said that, if there were people in the community who didn't know about it, I apologise for that. But at the end of the day, it was a good outcome in a sense.
It wasn't an outcome, agree.
So I might take this opportunity. I think we've got an option, an online auction open right now for surplus plant and equipment based out of the Tailman Depot. Are viewing this Saturday, Steve? So if people want to be into that, and it's one of those options that takes a few days before it finishes. It's not one of those, I can understand. You had a second point, councillor Roundtree, sorry. That was it. Thank you. Questions without notice, councillors? Councillor Coleman, you've got your arm up. A question without notice.
Still wanting on Councillor Roundtree's 5.1, sorry.
Yeah, go on, sorry.
Yeah, that's right. Just down the bottom there, Mr Mayor, reiterating the site, do we have some sort of irrigation system down there, or is it just going to be have some dirt put in there and just hope it grows over? Because if it's got an irrigation system, it means you've got to, you know, put another pipe in or another sprinkler.
Through you, Mayor, I've got the person at the back who may be able to answer that question, otherwise we may have to do it on notice. Steve?
Yeah, no, there isn't any particular irrigation system presently. So we've got some underground services which we're in the process of removing, and some concrete and so forth, and we'll remediate with some clean line. So we'll see here.
Okay, I'm moving on to 5.2. Questions without notice? Councillor Taylor.
Through you, residents, I'd like to ask if councillors who wish to have some training in conflict of interest are able to have some training.
Debbie.
Through you,
Yep.
Mr Mayor. Yes, councillor Taylor, we've got scheduled meeting procedures workshop, and that was going to be included in that.
Excellent.
I think that's scheduled for September.
Thank you.
Very good. Any other questions without notice? Councillor Harper.
Just one which would be to David, but he's not here. Have we applied for the rebate for the recyclables, which is available to councils, to country councils for the 1920 year? There's a $12 a tonne rebate which is paid.
I'll have to take that on notice.
That will have to.
I'm sorry, but council, I don't know the answer to that, and I've just looked at my colleague at the back and he doesn't know. And I
We'll make
apologise.
sure we do have a look at that.
Manager of Infrastructure and Assets and an urgent family matter.
Yep.
Any other questions without notice? There being none, I go to petitions, of which there's nil. So then I move to item 7, deputations. We have one deputation, Kathy Harvey. Kathy, more welcome to come up. We're going to put you over here in the front. Now, I've sort of decided the party to to get here, and Kathy said she could probably manage. There is an audio visual which she's gave to Ashley earlier, which I'm hoping that'll work. Oh, it's on my camera, so Kathy, 10 minutes, and then the councillors can ask you questions for a while. Thank you.
Yes, I'd like to thank the Coorong Council for allowing me to come and speak, and there's a lot to cover. I've got a lot of information, so I might sound like I'm glossing over it. If you need more facts, just let me know. So I'm presenting to you why I think the Coorong Council should maintain the GM-free zone. So who am I to be able to come and talk to you? One, I'm a vet. I'm off Narung Peninsula, been farming there for 35 years, 2,300 hectares, dairy, beef and cropping. I'm a veterinarian and a Nuffield scholar. Nuffield scholars are chosen to do farming scholarships around the world. And my big take-home message from my scholarship was that farming is very much a price taker, and to differentiate, we want to have a niche. And this is what I feel the GM-free zone will give our farmers an opportunity to keep a niche, not join the commodity. So what I want to cover today, I want to cover what GM crops we're talking about, what are the risks to marketing and trade, what's the trade advantage of having a GM-free zone, and why can we not have a GM-free zone with a GM zone? These are the questions that if you put up to the government, we've got to satisfy that there is an economic reason. So what GM crops am I talking about? Before I go any further, this is a roadside picture at Narung, on the Narung Road, and very few people go up and down the Narung Road, and you can see this was taken back in June, and it's full of canola. So just keep that in mind. That is just from trucks driving along, taking their stuff to the silos. Okay, so what crops are available to our area that we will grow? So available at the moment is Roundup Ready canola, which tolerates over-the-top herbicide spraying. which is glyphosate. Recommended to do about 3 sprays. The final spray allows the farmer to harvest direct rather than have to windrow the canola. But every time you spray the canola, there's the risk of residues within the product. Safflower is available, but it's really a minor industrial crop and really not grown here and not much to talk about with profits. And GM canola is available, but not for our state. So people, I think, a lot of farmers don't want to shut the door on having GM free because they think, what are they going to miss out on? Well, there's not much to miss out on, especially unavailable in the foreseeable future. There's ryegrass being investigated, buffalo grass, fescues, and there have been trials and they're not close to being released. There's resistance, ryegrass for dairy cows, the big factories like Fonterra, etc. They don't actually want to have products that the cows have raised genetically modified fodder because that's not what the public wants. And in the US, they've also, and Lucent's much the same, and in the US, they've had wheat trials, about 1,000 of wheat trials have been done since 2000 and something, and none of them have reached the market. And we've had wheat trials in Australia since 2005. They've been testing 11 varieties, and none of these are near release. Going, okay, so in summary, people have said, and they make these statements, that there's GM drought, salt, acid, frost-tolerant varieties, nitrogen fixation in grain, and that they're more nutritious. These promises have been given to us since the 1990s. Conventional breeding has delivered the same results, but GM has failed. So some results, sorry. So yeah, there's lots of promises, but it's not there yet. Not there. So when looking at what genetically modified crops we have in South Australia, we're really looking at canola. The Mercado report showed that 2% of the broadacre commodities, so the dollar value to South Australia, canola is 2%. In that report, they said that about 10% of farmers said they'd grow it. I think interstate you might have 20%. And of that, that means that we give up being GM free, being clean and green for 0.02% value to the broadacre crop. And that is because, I could have tried to be quick, but it costs you more to buy the grain, you've got to sign a contract, you've got to do a course, you can't keep the seed for your use later, and you get consistently a discounted product price because of all the extra costs in segregating the grain, transporting it, storing it, labelling it, etc.
5 minutes, Kathy.
Yep, how am I going?
I
That's
don't know.
fine.
I don't know how much you got.
Okay, risk to marketing and trade. Okay, so risk to marketing and trade, well, CSIRO did a poll, so did the Nielsen report, and they showed that only 7% of shoppers were unconcerned about eating GM food. So you will see that most supermarkets do not stock GM labelled food. And that the University of Adelaide put out a report showing that there is a 16% growth in demand for non-GM food globally. And this is done from Watson, and just shows that people are worried about it. 48% in global shoppers ranked at number 5 out of their worries. So there are GM premiums, GM-free premiums, and there are GM discounts. CSIRO, Dr. Sandra Eadie, and the Australian Export Grains Innovation Centre chief economist said, we achieved $100 million per year premium for our farmers because they grew GM-free canola. And at the moment, you can log on and look at any of the things, but there's a discount of $20 to $40, usually in Victoria or New South Wales. I think it's even $60 at the moment. That's what it says. In Western Australia, it's been $95 to $100. So you get that less for growing GM. So it costs you more to grow it, it's more work, and you get less for it. And you lose that status. So what are the trade advantages of GM-free zone? I just quickly put this up, very confusing if you look at the map, but we supply the EU and Japan. 53% of our canola goes to EU because they only want GM-free canola with a contamination rate of 0.9%. The canola used to come from America and Canada, but because they started growing GM in 2002, since 2005, 2006, we have seen South Australia's picked up the market. And the other thing is that potentially at the moment there's a drought in Europe, and that we could actually be selling double our canola to them. Also, they pay a premium price. America and Canada are selling their product to Asia, and they are getting not as much. So current export opportunities for Australian canola. So where is our market? It's overseas. It's EU, and if it's locally and it goes into food, it's got to be, preferably GM free. I noticed that in Victoria, the GM canola is going into feedstocks because they can't sell it on the more premium markets. So the future canola exports, that's actually going to be a changing thing. There's a report, Collier report, and that talks about how when we sell to the EU, they like to have GM-free canola because they can use it for biofuels, they can feed it to animals, and they can make oil, and it's GM-free, so it's quite versatile. If you go non-GM, if you go GM, that is shut to you. PIRSA just released its planning guide, and that showed that GM canola is significantly less profitable than non-GM canola, and that's 5-year gross margin looking at it. Western Victoria study, the other thing people will throw at you is that we will get more canola, but I only read one thing that showed an increase in yield, and so generally there's no yield advantage. So potential marketing opportunities, this is what I think is important, is if we lose our GM-free zone, we lose marketing opportunities, we lose our versatility. Farmers are always price takers. It is nice to be something in the minority, so you're the niche. Kangaroo Island is maintaining their moratorium, and they deal with a Japanese company, and they're getting $100 per tonne premium. Now, I spoke to the people at KI Pure, and he said that they are growing their market, they are seeking more grain that will come to the mainland, but they will only grow from genetically modified free zones. Okay. Other industries are affected. Yeah, it's not just when you look at grains, it's the flow-on effect. The honey producers are not meant to have, they have to declare if they have genetically modified crops where their bees might go from. The wine growers like to be able to tout themselves as from a GM-free area. The fishing industry, I worry about the residues of the extra sprays going into the water. The fishermen tell me they can smell the chemicals coming over the water when it's been sprayed. And tourism is also another thing. So I think GM-free is to be a point of differentiation, especially in the growing local, global health and wellness markets. It is to be mainstream market in the future. And I think that we are cutting ourselves off from this.
20 seconds I'm going to give you.
Okay. so basically, do I think we can coexist together? No. Segregation hasn't worked. They try to tell you it has. They changed the rules on what it means to be GM-free from being 0% to 0.9%. So we can't exist together. And I feel that we give up a whole lot of marketing opportunities and income by going the other way. And at this stage, if you are contaminated and you're a GM-free person or an organic person and you're contaminated, which has happened at my place this year, you get no comeback on the neighbour. And I liken this to COVID-19. You might think it's your right to not wear a mask, but for everybody else's sake, if you wear a mask, you stop the spread. You can't stop the spread of these GM crops that have been on.
Okay.
Thank you for listening.
We now give elected members the opportunity to ask questions. Is there any questions? Councillor Hill.
So if there's not this great return, why has the US and Canada embraced this technology?
Because they're huge marketing forces, which is happening here. Most of the advice going out to farmers is from companies that are being paid, like CropLife is not independent. CropLife is funded by Bayer and a big company. They have spent a lot of money making these GM products. They want to sell their product. If you buy their GM canola, you've got to buy certain varieties of glyphosate. It's big business. That's the reason. The Americans are actually becoming one of the biggest consumers of our organic product. And because they don't want to label their product, people are buying organic.
Councillor Yench.
Thank you. well presented.
Yeah.
Have you spoken to council people in Alexandrina, Victor Florio? Because I have a number and they have indicated to me that their preference is to be GM free.
Well, I actually have a connection. I would love that number. I want to talk to them because what I didn't get time to say was that there are councils that are looking to go GM free and they'd like to join up with other councils and maybe put money together, like Gawler's looking at this, to get, say, an economist to put forward the figures and to share the cost of doing that. So, yeah, that would be good. And I think the more we could join up with each other, the better. And it's just, as you see, financially, with such a small amount, there's no, I just can't, the figures don't add up to grow. Except for, I think, people are fearful of missing out on something that's not available yet. I'm not saying don't change your mind later. Maybe there's something comes up that it is worth changing your mind. But at this stage, I don't see there's any really good reason to give up our GM free status. And if I can just say, I was going to put forward if the council doesn't want to change the whole area, whether my small area that I live in, the Narung Peninsula and sort of surrounds, could go that way, because we have one of the big canola growers, as you know, got 2,000 hectares in this year, and he told me he's not interested in growing genetically modified canola. And there's my neighbour. So all the people I've spoken to in my area, which isn't everybody, I haven't had time, but they're not interested in growing genetically modified canola.
Councillor Roundtree.
So that was my questions around, I hadn't realised that it was only canola that's available to South Australians. Are we different from the other states, or is it mostly only South Australia's canola?
It depends on your climatic conditions. Others can grow cotton, and we're not really, I think safflower might have high rainfall, but it's a small market to give up the advantage. And there aren't that many things in Australia available, and that's sort of it. There's all this hype, but it's not actually there. There is actually another product which is conventionally bred, which can use 2 different types of sprays over canola, I think Clearfield, and that's okay. And also, I didn't even touch on the fact that you'll get resistance. You know, you're using Roundup resistant canola, you're going to just look at all that canola on the side of the road, so you can't spray that out with glyphosate.
Sorry, Councillor Bland.
Sorry.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Have you made a comment about Gawler looking at the economics of it, because most councils themselves cannot afford to do it individually across the board? Do you know have any idea of the cost of that if this council were to have a look at it from an economic point of view, or even section off?
I heard a figure of $20,000.
And do you have any idea how many councils they were talking about?
No, because everybody's a bit like you. They're first getting over the do we go GM free. But I know that's the Gawler Council, and I'm in the Gene Coalition, the Gene Ethics Coalition, which are trying to convince people that it might be better to stay GM free, and so they're trying to connect everybody up. But it seems silly for everyone to sort of make the same type of submission. It's a bit like people making the same submission to the council. When it's all the same reasons, they can either spend a lot of their time they don't have trying to write up the thing, or they can just go, oh, here, this says what I want to say, and send it. So I think if the councils, join together that won't put a submission, that would be the way to go. And I am seeking to talk to Minister David Basham.
Councillor Arthur.
So probably we always seem to get bogged down with GM canola when we talk about GM in our area. But there's, like conference a few years ago when they had Americans over with GM Lucent, and that created a hell of an interest for GM Lucent. Also at that same conference, there was a dairy farmer in Victoria that was growing GM ryegrass for cow fodder. So, it's not just canola. And how do we, as a council, declare an area GM free, which restricts a person's ability to do their farming? It's almost as if we're getting to a situation where you can't grow canola this week, you've got to grow barley, and you grow wheat, and you grow beans.
Well, I don't think that, those products, the ryegrass and the ryegrass and
Lucerne.
the lucerne are not available, and
No, they're not in Australia.
no,
Oh,
and
Victoria must be.
and the one that was grown in Victoria, I'm not sure about, but I know that in other countries, the ryegrass spreads, it's windborne spread. What I didn't tell you was in Tasmania, they did a canola trial in about 96. It's taken 15 years to clear up the contamination that has made to the surrounding areas, and Tasmania has maintained its GM-free status. So the problem is that once you grow it, you can't bring it back. And it's not like you're growing something that you can maintain on your property and not contaminate everybody else. You grow it and it's going to spread. And I think that's one of my big beefs with this, is that it's not like you grow it and it stays on your property, okay, that's fine. It's a bit like if I sprayed my, I don't know, I sprayed something to spray out my crop and it goes over the fence and sprays out your crop, you actually do get compensation. But for some reason, probably because of the big companies, if you spread GM canola all over my place, not yet GM canola, I have no redress. And in WA, there's a case, Marsh versus Baxter. He was a farmer. He lost
That was
his
organic,
farm.
wasn't it?
He was organic,
Yeah.
but the same will go for the non-GM. If they're non-GM and they've got contaminated crops, they'll lose their premium. And then, you know, maybe they'll get around it and everyone says, well, it's happening over in other states, but it's happening because they're having to alter the rules, like they have to increase the amount of contamination that's allowed. And I suppose, is it worth it? If you're going to get, it's going to cost you more, you're going to get paid less, you're going to make resistant weeds, when you can just keep going as you are, you can maintain a premium, you have more choice where you sell. To me, that's actually giving you more choices than less.
Well, hopefully a farmer would have the brains to work that out.
Well, they're getting fed stuff from the companies, you know, and they're tired, they're busy, the guy tells me this is the best thing to do, and I don't have time to work it out, and he should know, and I'll just take this. It's a bit like the pharmaceutical companies, you know, dry dog food. I'm a vet, I tell you, dry dog food, you know, that sort of thing. So, yeah.
All right, we're getting down to any other
I'm
councillors.
sorry.
I will give you another question, councillor.
Oh,
So I
someone
want
else
to make
doesn't
sure.
have one, Tracy.
I want to make sure that no one else, Tracy. So if there's no one else, I've got two councillors, councillors Hill and Stove, Tracy.
I was talking to an ecologist on the weekend, and she said it's a wider problem. Unfortunately, as a council, we're not allowed to address the wider problem because we can only talk about it from an economic point of view. But she said in America that they're actually they're splicing bacteria genes into the crops to actually it kills the grubs.
Yeah. Well, there are,
And it doesn't discriminate between one particular grub and another grub. All the grubs die. So the monarch butterflies and things like that are all dying.
look, I've done a lot of reading on, you know, gene technology. There's the book Whitewash. We haven't even touched on glyphosate residues, which are not being monitored. They've increased the levels in Australia by something like, I don't know, up to 10 times what's allowable. There's lots as well, but like the government are only interested in the economics, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Sorry, councillor Roundtree, and then if there's nothing else, we'll probably wind it up.
So the seed ownership's an issue for me too. So when you're going back to what's best for the farmer, the fact that they can't, if they're in this program, grow their seed, store their seed, clean their seed, use it, I think it's actually a very big controlling point. Secondly, on our horticultural enterprise, we use soil solutions, live organisms in the sandy soils to build up the organic matter. I would imagine that would be at risk of genetically modified canola coming over.
Well, maybe not the genetically modified canola, probably doesn't matter, but I know that the research even Monsanto have done on the effects of glyphosate on soil biology was detrimental, but they haven't released it. If you read the book Whitewash Kerry Gillen, that she outlays that.
Okay, if there's no more questions, I think everyone's had a fair go. Thank you very much.
I would just like to ask through Mr. Mayor is, you know, we have a large diverse council and there will be obviously diverse opinions on this. I'm just wondering what, through you, probably to the CEO and perhaps Kathy, is an opportunity to look at perhaps a suggestion around the Narrabri Peninsula on how one might go about that if we want to keep a niche area in this council, given that it is a fairly isolated area that has potential and significant waterways near it, or do we think of looking at the whole Gorman opportunity to join up to see what the economics do stack up.
So councillors, you haven't made a decision to go down that path of putting up an economic case, but I think the first part of your question statement, Councillor Glenn, is probably a reasonable question to ask.
So through you, Mayor, my understanding, we had this conversation on the MRLTA the other day to see whether it should be a collective in terms of an approach to government. And it was pointed out, and rightly so, that each local government area has a responsibility to, the collective can put up a comment or an overarching statement, but they can't actually apply to the exemption. And the same applies for it's either all or nothing, it's my understanding, in terms of the local government area. So I can't remember the wording, but I think it specifically includes what Kathy is suggesting in terms of hiving off. We could put it up, but I don't think that was the intent of the government asking local governments to do this piece of work.
I'd be interested to see whether the minister would be partial to having a look at that opportunity. But also what it really is. Because honestly, I think everybody out there doesn't know who they are.
So, okay, thank you. I think we'll probably just find that out discreetly. Once again, Kathy, thank you very much for your presentation.
So I have some information papers.
Probably should leave it on the table if you may.
If anyone wants to read it, and I'm happy to speak to other groups if you think that will help.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, can you just that paper have your details on it?
No.
I'm sure.
We have Dr. Harvey's contact details that we can circulate if you provide them.
Okay, I'll let Kathy just put them in there, and I'm going to move along.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right, please, Rob. Thank you. Public question time. Sorry, Anna, is there anything on the list up there? Any public questions? Sorry, there's no question. No, so public question time, there is none. Thank you. We move to item 8, reports by members. Mayor's reports there. Councillors, I might just thank, I think Councillor Taylor opened Sala here with this art collection, Councillor, which has actually made this room a lot more warm than the cold box it was last time I was here. And Councillor Arthur, I think you do it with that since now. Is anyone else involved in the Sala opening? I'm sorry, I was just double booked on those days. Any other questions about my report? Okay. So it'll be noted that Nil report doesn't mean you're a bad councillor, but we just got to prompt you to make sure every 3 months that you put a report. Councillor Hill, do you have anything to add? No. Any questions to Councillor Hill?
One question through you, Mr. Mayor, just on having the nil report or just putting in, are we supposed to put them in monthly? Can we just get some clarification around that? Because otherwise it looks like we're being tardy. 3 monthly, then we
3 months.
need to write in there that we have to submit.
Through you, Mayor, it was just a prompt to, because, and I won't pick on Councillor Taylor, but it went back to March.
It wasn't as long as Councillor Bland's last one, which is.
So, I suppose what the prompt for you, Mayor, was to say that residents in the community are generally interested in what you've been doing in the community. So I would encourage you to do it monthly, but quarterly is what the expectation is. And we will take the 2 out, and it's just nil report, it's not 2 reports. Yeah.
Yes, that's not
Yeah.
working.
No, no.
Okay, Councillor Yench,
Nothing to add, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
thank you. Councillor Taylor. Okay, no more of them. Number 9, there is nil notices of motion. So we move to motions without notice. Is there any motions without notice? Councillor Taylor.
I have one. I move the council, after consultation with the Indigenous owners of the land and wider interested communities, seek grant funding in order to conduct a feasibility study to scope the design and construction of an open-air theatre on the edge of the River Murray under the project name Tagalong Floating Theatre.
Has actually got the copy of that or not? I just,
Not yet.
well, I'm just trying to help her out a little bit by saying, let me say that again. She's got halfway and self, I noticed.
So after consultation with the Indigenous owners of the land and wider interested community, seek grant funding in order, wider interested community, seek grant funding in order to conduct a feasibility study to scope the design and construction of an open-air theatre on the edge of the River Murray under the project name Tagalong Floating Theatre.
One word.
That's it?
That's a motion.
Then councillor Palmer, you with the seconder. Thank you. Indicate to me. So,
Through you, Mayor. Councillor Tyler, can I suggest that if we're going to do consultation with the Indigenous community, we might refrain from actually naming what the project is?
Can I get to that in here?
I'll let you speak to your motion, councillor.
Thank you. For background, the eventual name of the theatre would be a decision of the traditional owners of the land. The final location would also need to be determined by the traditional owners of the land, but has been identified as approximately 50 to 60 metres downstream of the water pumping station. Another consideration for that area at the moment is the high number of raptors which nest in the upper cliff. So the name is just an identifier. It's by no means the name. It was just put to me by a member of the community. I was approached by some years ago by Helen Bowering of Taylor Bend with information on the Blue Sky project to create a theatre on the river's edge of Taylor Bend. The theatre could mirror or be similar in concept and design to the Minack Theatre of Cornwall in England, which is the style of in the style of an amphitheatre currently cut directly into the rock. This is tiny writing, facing the ocean out into the English Channel. I've since had other discussions with the Taylor Bend community who have approached me. This is in no way, in any shape or form, my idea. While on board the Captain Proud at the opening of the Dixon Reserve floating pontoon, I was pretty much nabbed by some of the community there who wanted to show me the location. And I was given the opportunity to discuss this further as the community pitched the idea at me. The target land downstream of the pumping station is under native title. Cutting rock seating into the limestone would be not only cost prohibitive, it would probably be unacceptable to the traditional owners of the land due to the indigenous artifacts which may be on the land. Therefore, a design could include piles driven into the rock on which an arrangement of terraced seating could be created. The stage, certainly to start with, could be a large floating platform on the river with extensive boardwalks created along the river's edge with further piles sunk to boat moorings, which may also have power connections. Creating additional boat moorings would meet the aspirations of Dr. Shaheen, who is very pro-river moorings and its associated tourism. The boardwalk could be a viewing point of indigenous works of art, such as a sculpture trail. Done correctly, the whole project could be an exemplar of sustainable building created using recycled materials, such as heavy-duty recycled plastic decking planks for seating, with a high emphasis and requirement for low to no maintenance, and therefore, beyond construction, low to no ongoing costs to the rate-paying community. The Taylor Bend Community Centre, driven by CEO Tammy Shepherd, had already started preliminary investigation into the project. They did not get the support they needed to drive this further forward without using dedicated resources and funding, which they just did not have. John Harvey, who is also a prominent member of the Taylor Bend community, contacted me at the weekend, is a strong supporter of the project and is willing to provide his input and information gathered during his talks with the local Indigenous community leadership, including Clive Rigney, and others are also prominent backers of this project already. A dedicated outdoor theatre could not only be a huge asset to the district's own community members for events, weddings, plays, performances, and Indigenous ceremonies and many others, but could also be a huge tourist draw card, especially if additional moorings are put in place to attract the boating community to not only drop by, but to stay a while, either to attend the event or to make use of the district's other wider opportunities. The identified area has substantial parking opportunities already on the top of the cliff. A picture of eventually having the district's tourism information hub at the parking location. On my suggestion again.
I hope we're nearly there, councillor.
I'm nearly there. The dedicated information centre could then be the gateway for the district. While I appreciate the community will shortly be asked to contribute to a wider community vision, and I'm certain this will play a pivotal role in that vision, I've brought this up now so that it sits prominently at the top of the pile rather than sits lower down the long list of aspirational projects. I therefore ask Council to support the community by supporting this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Qualman, do you want to speak to that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief, as I normally are. Yes, Helen Barry approached me and similar to what's been Councillor Taylor's brought up and about this amphitheatre in the side of the cliff, Mr. Mayor. What I think is a feasibility study, and we'll go down, hopefully get money from somewhere else rather than from our kitty. It's a good idea, and this all ties in with our southern end of Carlin Bend, or the boat approaches, which we have talked about and has been just put aside at the moment. It all encompasses that idea to make both ends of the town more attractive and some other asset we can be really proud of. And also, most importantly, Mr. Mayor, it will highlight the Indigenous culture and put that on display. So I think this is a bit of a go. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to enter this debate? Councillor Arthur, and then Councillor Hill. Sorry.
Yeah, I've got no problems with the concept of the Indigenous owners and the community getting together and going for grants. I have got a problem with council having to do it at this stage. It is not a budgeted figure. So, you know, we have said previously that we don't want to change things in the budget. We don't want to have new capital projects, which this would be. It's almost inferred this would be a council project. So I will be voting against it. But if the community and the Indigenous owners want to go on with it, I'll be very supportive of it.
Thank you. Councillor Hill.
Two things. One is the word is actually Tagalang, which is the Nurundjeri word.
Lang.
Tagalang.
With an A.
Second thing, yeah, this would be a huge infrastructure project, it obviously does need a, if it's going to proceed, obviously going to be access issues being down a cliff and things like that. So yeah, it'll be a major project. So we need to keep an eye on whether the council has any ability to put everything together.
Thank you. Seek grant funding in order to conduct a feasibility study of the important words I'm reading in that motion, councillors. Councillor Jensen and Councillor Bland.
Seek grant funding. I think I haven't, in essence, I have no real problem with this other than what is it going to cost and what obligations are we going to find ourselves with. I think facilitate, open the discussion, yes, but we could spend a lot of money seeking grant funding. It could be a very significant project for the staff of this council if it gets out of hand. The other aspect is that its location, whilst it's all very nice on the cliff, that's the windiest part of Tailem Bend. It is a very exposed area. Yes, you'll have a lot of good days, but my God, you'll get some bad ones, and they don't come necessarily good. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Bland.
In my experience is that feasibility studies don't come zero, so that would need a budget variation to be considered before
went any further with this and have some idea of what that feasibility study might be, including consultation. The other thing is we do have public consultation about to happen for community project, community issues, community concerns about what they'd like to see in the future. We certainly can run this one. I don't have an issue, but I think I would like to see a general overall view of Orangery in Yarra people on both sides of the not only the council, this council, but Alexandria, Murray Bridge area. And we also need to be a party to some of this. I think that we need to consult with the Aboriginal people in general. So the general comment I have, I've been to Minark and I think it's brilliant if we could do it. But I would like to, have some idea of what the feasibility is before I would support this. I like the concept, but I would like to know a little bit more before we just go in and say that we conduct a feasibility study to just go with design, because my understanding is that takes a lot of money.
I'm helping you out. I'm reading the minute with a motion. Seek grant funding in order to conduct a feasibility study.
And I have read that, and it takes money to do that.
Do that part, I understand that.
So I mean, unless we're going to allocate funding at the next budget review that, or whenever that is, then I think there's a whole pile of projects that are going to require exactly that, feasibility study and scope and design and construction of whatever it is that you want. I don't want to jump the gun on community.
Councillor Round.
I think what Councillor Bland said just at the end there, that there are going to be a lot of projects that require grant funding to be sought with the help of council. This is another one of them. I think it's an excellent project. It's already got buy-in and investment from our Indigenous community. It doesn't even have to be done this financial year. It could be done in the 3 financial years from here. I don't think there's anything in this motion that says it's now or next year or year after that. Simply this motion is saying, let's put some time towards some grant to get the grant funding to do the feasibility study. So I think it's actually just getting it on the books. And it doesn't commit us to anything except looking into it a little bit further and getting it started. That's all it's saying. Otherwise it gets lost and the idea gets lost. Perhaps it might get picked up later, but it's on the books. Let's just look at it. It's a great idea.
Okay. Anyone else? Councillor, that's been the case. Councillor Tully, close debate. Thank you. So the motion is as you see it, after consultation with Indigenous owners of the land and wider interested communities, we seek grant funding in order to conduct a feasibility study to scope the design and construction of an open air theatre on the edge of the River Murray under the project name Tagalong Floating Theatre. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Declare the motion carried with councillors Yench. Sorry, I'll put the motion again until it's closed. Sorry. Those in favour? So voting for the motions, councillors Coleman, Roundtree, Taylor, Lang and Simmons. And voting against are councillors Hill, Land and Yench. It's still carried. Thank you. Any other motions without notice? There is none. I'll move on. Office of the Chief Executive Officer's report. Item 1 is Disability Access and Inclusion Plan, a draft. The recommendation with 2 parts. Councillors. Councillor Ling, thank you. Councillor Yanch is the seconder. Councillor Ling, do you want to speak to it?
No.
Yanch, do you want to speak to it?
No, thank you.
Councillors, the process is perhaps Bridget this is worthy of a brief report.
Are you seeking any comments?
I'll perhaps just let her give a précis and then Councillors Hill and Roundtree.
As you know, we, not only by law, but I think it's good practice that we have a disability access and inclusion plan. The process started earlier this year. It was a presentation to council. There has been community consultation with 124 respondents in one way or another. We're now asking, the draft has been developed, we're now asking your permission to go out to the community with the draft document for final feedback before we actually register it as a document with the Department of Human Services, and it then is embedded in as one of the strategic documents for Coorong District Council. That process will take, the consultation will be the 24th of August to the 18th of September. We then register it, and by the 31st of October, it becomes council's documentation.
Councillors, we've got a relatively tight time frame with this one. I would note that the issues of access to the Canalpin Post Office have been picked up by the staff already, amongst the many interesting comments in the consultation process. But that one in particular has been looked at as we speak. Councillor Jentsch is seconder, so yes.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I'd like, if we're looking at the Canalpin issue, Taylor then Pizza Shop has the same issue with its door, and apparently someone fell there very bad.
So councillors, and the issue that we face with even acting out to a degree, and there's a bit of a grey area here, and as you know, Councillor Jentsch, back in the very dark ages when only you and me were councillors, it's not actually the council's responsibility to deal with private property. Correct. So the business owner or the owner of the building can deal with this, and this is the challenge that we're facing now. We can note it and perhaps speak to those people, but it's actually their responsibility in this area legally, we believe. Nonetheless, we're working with it, and as you know, the Tail and Bend, the little ups and downs in the footpath were around dealing with this problem back 15 years ago. The way the street steps were. I've got Councillor Hill next.
It concerns me, there's a couple of references in the feedback from the community that they're being told either by councillors or council samples somewhere that I will fix it, or there's money put aside for this. It may be their interpretation of what they were told. However, it's not our job as councillors to say that we're going to fix something for somebody, or we will assure them that there's going to be money put aside. So I just really need to make sure that when we're speaking with the public, that we're not promising them things that you can, that you're actually saying, well, we'll take it back to council, or take it to infrastructure or whatever. But yeah, be careful with the language you use when you're talking.
You read the report fully. It says I knew nothing about it. 3 times. Because I didn't. Okay, Councillor, that's your finished, Councillor. Yes, thank you, Councillor Roundtree.
Also read the report right through. I thought it was very interesting. One of the 3 key themes that came up from the community were the footpaths, toilet access, disability ramps were a common theme, I think, amongst all the respondents. We need to make sure we get this out to a wide range of people in a wide range of formats. And I think encouraging them and myself too, when we get an opportunity to review it, is looking at the priorities and the timing attached to some of those priorities. I was going to start commenting, and then I realised it wasn't time to start commenting on that, but certainly the priorities and the timing of them need to have a good hard look at those. But I think it's a really good start, and definitely long overdue for our region. Let's make sure we get it out there as many people as possible.
Councillor Arthur.
Yeah, I'd just like to make a comment on the report, and footpaths are a big thing, and it's a big thing in every town. Every town. I don't know, maybe Steve could enlighten us a bit. I had someone down doing some grinding or watering footpaths down the city the other day, and an absolute waste of money. They ground off a little bit of a lip off an area where the concrete's all cracked. And they spend I saw them there for one whole day, and you go along and see what they've done. I don't know what the idea was, but it's an absolute waste of money. I don't know if that was your guys, Steve, or wasn't. It was contractors doing it. Yeah, but it just, we've had an accident down there where someone's gone arm over tip. Sorry, should have said that. Arm over face.
All got on.
So, I just wonder why we do, and it's not even, in my opinion, it's not even a band-aid job.
So, yeah, okay.
Yeah, and we all know footpaths are a big thing, but where's your budget priorities? That's where it comes down to, and maybe we may have to.
Anyone else wish to add to the debate? I suppose I'm going to. I suppose I've noted in reading the discussion around it, the particular things, obviously a footpath. Second one is the product of exit use, hard rubbish pickup. I think that's a very difficult one for us to decide who's worthy and who isn't. Opening the door will seem to be quite a problem, basically. And this is the one that affects a bloke at my girth, is that as park seating when the benches are too close to the tables. I have a constant problem with that. I get quite offended by that problem. You with me, councillors? And I do get quite annoyed by the designs that obviously are built for midgets.
By the mentioned design, it's all spread out.
Well, that's what it needs to be. Issues more around technology, I think, was in this initial consultation, and the fact that not everyone can access technology, let alone people with a disability. And I noticed there the issue of the Lakeland and now having an $80 printing was an issue. So whether we can respond in that area as well, dementia. And the last thing I've noted here, and I've talked to CEO this very briefly, is I think we're moving into a different time again in terms of home offices or granny flats, and that might be something we can start pursuing in a planning sense. I get quite frustrated watching, it's not really a disability issue, watching all the Zoom meetings now with a variety of activities in the background, and I think we're changing the dynamic of society. Anyway, Councillor, there's no other discussion. Yes,
Just quickly, can I just ask, when you're talking
I
about
know,
that,
yes.
how are we going to put this out to the public? Because the fact that, like, we haven't got the local rag now, which is not the many people. But to me, the best way to get it is through the local, the Hub newsletter, the Lakeland, and the Farming Topics. Because you do know they actually get to the people. Because they are put on, they go to various places and they are taken.
Yeah,
So you do know, and, the percentage of people that haven't got electronic devices is and in that age group, it's very high.
And we need to go age group, Councillor. Will we be able to achieve that actually in the time frame, do you think?
Through the mayor, yes. So it says in the report, we're going to do it through a variety of means. We'll be doing our media releases. That will definitely be going into the local publications. Now that the Murray Valley Standard is up and running, we'll go through that one as well, we hope. There'll be actual face-to-face sessions if we can allow it in COVID-19. So yeah, it'll be circulated as widely as we can.
And there's nothing to stop you as councillors promoting this in the community. I mean, I probably don't want to become a bidding option for footpaths, but at least the policy position, getting it out there, please.
And if you do want to do some radio interviews, Mr. Mayor, make sure you do 1161. But that's 99% of the people down our way. That's what they listen to.
No, I know they do, yes. They've got a lot of journalists and have ambulance want to speak to us. It's quite interesting. Okay, there's no one else to speak. Councillor Lang.
Thank you. Very important, particularly as I'm myself becoming very aware of disability access with my condition. There are a lot of things that the council needs to address. There are a lot of old structures of council that will have to be caught up with. This is more orientated towards what the council should be doing. Disability Act already controls supply of ramps, etc., in post offices and other buildings. Private structures has nothing to do with the council other than under the Planning Act, and perhaps our planning office needs to take a closer look at disability access when granting new building access, etc. But unfortunately, as I understand it, if the purpose of use of the building does not change, it does not have to comply with current standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Close the debate. I put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously, councillors. Okay, item 2, Financial and Administrative Management Investigation Report.
Happy to move that.
You're happy to move that?
Now, I'd like to create a personal statement in regards to this and then declare an interest in it.
Council, so councillors, I've received the final version of the councillor's personal statement 1 minute prior to the meeting, and I will give Councillor Yench 5 minutes to read his personal statement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This investigation by Galpins on behalf of the Coorong District Council into my credit card transactions, fuel card transactions, mayoral allowance payment, reimbursements, and any other financial dealings with council continues to prove that I'm an honest man. Having served this community for over 25 years, I have never seen a chamber more divided than this one. I believe this investigation was done with the sole purpose of shaming, humiliating, in an attempt to destroy my reputation locally, within the local government, and also within the local government sector. Unlike others in politics, I was not required to alter documents that are years old in an effort to justify my actions. The consequences of this motion 043/20 has had a detrimental effect upon members of my family, with yet again ongoing social media trolls being actively engaged in false truths. This is unacceptable and is also unforgivable. Shame on you. Previously, as mayor, I used my council credit card and resources and had been internally and externally audited with no fault found on my part. The Auditor General investigative released earlier this year reported no fault found on my part. I have always worked within the policies and procedures of the day. So I ask members, what is the objective of placing the Coorong District Council in a position of spending $16,341 of your funds on another investigation when the council was advised that it would be of little or no financial benefit to you, the ratepayers and council? This report has proven to be a waste of ratepayers' money that would have been better spent if allocated to critical needed community projects like the Tailem Bin Netball Court upgrade. I believe we are facing an incredibly complicated and tragic future. Our ratepayers need council that is stable and focused on the way forward, not emotively addicted to the past. It's time for all hands on deck. And I do declare a material conflict of interest in relation to this agenda item, so I will therefore excuse myself. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. And I note to councillors that there is no questions to be asked in a personal statement. Councillor, I'll go back to Councillor Roundtree, who was going to move something to. Sorry. Yes, you.
Yes.
And then Councillor Taylor.
Mr. Mayor.
No, I want to move a statement, move a motion.
Yes, I'm
Yes,
moving
yes.
the motion, yes.
What motion are you moving?
To accept to the council receive a note of financial administrative management investigation report provided by Galpins, and then I would like to speak to it at the end of this.
So as it is read, it is written, you're moving that way.
Yes.
All right, thank you. I'll put ask for a seconder first. Councillor Taylor is the seconder. Councillor Roundtree, you have 5 minutes.
I've read the findings of the Galpins report and they're concerning. I've decided to put some information together to put it into context, so I ask you to indulge me for about 6 minutes. The formal practice of the Mayor and the CEO authorising each other's credit card expenditure is a conflict of interest.
I just, sorry to stop, just check that the councillor is well clear of this room, please. Continue.
77% of the former Mayor's credit card transactions that were examined had insufficient supporting documentation, and we don't know if those expenses were appropriate or not. For ease and clarity, I will refer to the former Mayor as Councillor Yench from here on. Only 39% of the transactions were considered to be incurred for business purposes, and this included alcohol purchases, but even though the elected members' allowance, benefits and support policy stated that alcoholic beverages would not be reimbursed. Whilst the Galpins report is alarming, I believe there are 5 main financial probity issues the council should be concerned about. 1, fuel expenditure and mileage. 2, handling of expenditure and credit cards. 3, septic waste dumping arrangements. 4, policy breaches. 5, offsetting Councillor Yench's debts with his council allowance. Point 1, the Galpins report provides a breakdown of approximate funds spent on fuel purchases per year, month, week, and that were charged to Councillor Yench's card. Using 10 litres of fuel per 100 kilometres and a fuel price of $1.04 a litre, which was averaged in 2016, the total kilometres over 4 years are approximately 177,000. I then compared this information what was reported to Council in his mayoral reports. I looked at 5 months worth of reports, January to May 16, and found that Councillor Yench travelled approximately 4,339 kilometres while undertaking his mayoral role for that 5-month period. My calculations show that approximate kilometres Councillor Yench travelled on official council business over a 4-year period was approximately 41,651. Yet the amount of money spent on fuel for that period, $18,498, according to Galpins, equates to around 177,000 kilometres. That is some 136,000 kilometres unaccounted for in mayoral reports, for a cost to the ratepayer of over $14,000 in unsubstantiated fuel expenditure. The Galpins report also examined 4 years' worth of transactions, but noted that 76% of the fuel transactions were incurred in 2016, and the month with the highest fuel expenditure was May 16, which was $706 spent. This does not stack up against Councillor Yench's mayoral report for May 16, where he stated he travelled to Tailem Bend 4 times, Yumali once, Adelaide once, and Tintinarra and Menindee once each. Assuming he was leaving from and returning to his home, that's 666 kilometres or $69 in fuel. The discrepancy there of over $636. And to put this into context, this could be the equivalent of one person's rates in Tailem Bend. Recommendation number 3 in the report suggested further investigation into the appropriateness of duplicate transactions on Councillor Yench's card. 9 duplicate fuel transactions were discovered from December 15 to 17, and unless Councillor Yench has a reasonable explanation for these duplicate transactions, we are left to assume 2 vehicles or 2 receptacles were being filled at each time. Point 2, handling of expenditure and credit cards. A number of anomalies were found, but no answers given. More information should be sought from Councillor Yench and others to clarify the explanation of $83 monthly admin fee paid to Councillor Yench and why it was not included in the council allowance benefits and support policy and is still being paid. What the nature of the $1,000 reimbursement to council for phone and internet was, and did this have anything to do with the internote arrangements? Further explanation as to why in some instances only 50% of his wife's costs were repaid and another 100%. And what is the nature of Councillor Yench's purchase of $244.50 in the Canberra Casino on June 1916? None of these questions have been answered.
1 minute.
The Galpins report also included a table that raised questions about dumping of septic waste on one of his properties. Clarification as to the nature of the waste dumping arrangement should be sought. Did the waste dumping arrangement go through the council's procurement policy? And how was his land selected to be the recipient of this waste? Is it still going? And were appropriate EPA licenses and permits in place to allow for the dumping of effluent waste? There's also a policy breach. Galpins noted that the motor vehicle policy in place during Councillor Yench's time as mayor had high level guidance about fuel purchases, and as he claims himself, he's an experienced person in local government for some 20 years under his belt. In light of the fuel and mileage information presented in the report, I believe council should make a determination if he breached the motor vehicle policy and in turn breached the code of conduct. And I also question the Galpins report states that Councillor Yench requested that his debts for rates, artwork and other reimbursements for personal purchase be deducted from his mayoral allowance. What mechanism or section of the Act allows councillor to use his allowance?
Councillor, we're at 5 minutes, but if I could ask for seek leave in the meeting for you to finish, if that was to be granted, you could finish. Councillors, do you wish to finish hearing that?
It's only a little bit.
I'm going to take it, if there's no objection, we finish that. Finish, you've got about another minute, Councillor.
Okay, so how was Councillor Yench allowed to incur personal costs on his council issue credit card? Are employees allowed to ask council to offset their rates with weekly wages, or are local contractors allowed to do the same thing? So in conclusion, I thank you to the CEO and the staff for their proactive approach to address the shortcomings of the previous council or management team by implementing policies and tightening controls around expenditure. Many of the recommendations from Galpins have already occurred, and for that I'm grateful. The impetus for this investigation conducted by Galpins stems from the information revealed in the Auditor General's report released earlier this year. And despite those horrible high costs, we have, as public officers, have a duty under the Act to report anything that we find. Therefore, I have 2 motions that I would like to move. And I'll give these to Ashley.
Sorry. Thank you, councillor. You at the moment, you have got one motion live on the floor.
Okay.
So they are effectively could follow this. Councillor Taylor is the second. You wish to not speak at this stage?
No.
Right, I invite other councillors to speak to the recommendation which as written.
I think it's quite straightforward, that motion that we received the report. That's all that motion is asking for at this stage.
Right. I'm going to end the meeting, but if there's no great debate around this motion, I'll put it. I gather that there may be other motions to come out of this yet. You always can.
Through you to the CEO, and given some of the stuff that Councillor Roundtree has run out, has any discussion happened for clarification on any of this at this point in time? Because it seems to me that while that statement has been made, I feel that there's this little black area sitting over here that doesn't tell me what conversation or discussions have had that may throw further light to some of this that's in writing.
That's what you mean. We asked Skeltons to do exactly what that motion asked for. We haven't done an analysis of it any further. If the chamber wants us to do that further analysis, we thought that was up to you to give you the report. As Councillor Roundtree mentioned, many of the things that came out of the Auditor General's report are referred to in here, but at the same time we were going through, and the credit card policy has been changed and the fuel policy and all those things have been tightened up. And that was happening in parallel to this work being done. So there are some things that have been done. There are still, as you mentioned, things in the report that need further clarification. Whether there is information available to provide that clarification is doubtful, given that we dug fairly deep to find most of this information and most of it's manual. But that's not to say that there are still some questions to be answered. There is also the reason it is also the reason we put in the calendars of the particular individuals involved, so that if people were looking at the report and there were some questions asked, could you look back at the calendar of diary entry to say, yes, that makes sense, or no, it didn't. So, but we have done no analysis.
Councillor, I think your question's around, just to tell me if I'm wrong, but has the council had a chance to respond?
Yes, but also that there's open-ended questions in here around, for example, is there a contract for the dumping of the waste? Which is, so this brings to me, is there a contract for dumping of the waste, or has there been in that case? Is that a legitimate thing? Regardless of whether someone's
perhaps you could raise them in a.
So to me, they seem to be that these are a little bit open-ended statements without an answer, one way or the other, possibly.
Sure. So probably at this stage, the council just notes, the motion is as it reads. I mean, there may be another motions in a minute around more depth for this. I think your question, though, was around, has the council had a chance to respond to some of the questions?
No, do you mean no? The report is as written.
The report's as written, and as you can see at some stages there that it was unclear what the adult was. That was pretty consistent on. Okay, anyone else on this motion? No, you will close the vote, councillor.
Okay.
Right, thank you. Sorry, councillor Taylor, I never gave you an opportunity to speak, but you did reserve it. No, okay, thank you. I'll put the motion, close the vote. Those against, that is carried unanimously. Is there anything else to come out of this? Councillor Roundtree, you indicated.
Two motions, I've given them to Ashley to type up.
So we'll deal with the first one first. I don't know what it is, so I'll look at it on the screen. How are we going?
We've got a couple of minutes while we're talking now.
Would you like me to read the motion?
No, perhaps we'll just wait again on the screen. It's always good. You, you can leave the chamber, councillor. I'm just going to leave the meeting live. I'll write this down.
And actually,
Just
I'm gonna email it to you.
these and these and stuff.
Do you want me to get that? Or just the first one?
The second one is quite long, councillor, so we.
right,
we'll
Would
take
you like me
it
to
back.
email it, Ashley?
She's offline, but-
Oh, okay.
I might just note that in the personal statement, the councillor said that council voted a certain way. But in starting this report in March, it was a unanimous vote of 8 of us in the room, excluding Councillor Yenchi, who was absent at that meeting, to investigate this report. Councillor Roundtree, you're going to move motion without notice,
Yes,
as it is written on the screen. So can I read it?
yes.
Move Councillor Roundtree that the Mayor and the CEO refer the matters within the Governor's report to the Council's solicitors, seek guidance on the right course of action, and that consideration be given to referring these matters to a higher authority or authorities to be dealt with along the Local Government Act 1999, the associated Code of Conduct for elected members. These authorities may include, but are not limited to, the Office of Public Integrity and the Ombudsman. You're moving that way, Councillor.
I move that way.
Righto, 3. Councillor Arthur, you're seconding it. Councillor Roundtree wants to speak to us.
I think I've said all I need to say. I'll provide a copy of what I've said to the CEO and to yourself.
Okay. Councillor Arthur.
Yes, I believe that this is the way to go. There's a lot of questions have got to be answered on the report, and I don't think we have the expertise to do it, and I believe it should go to the solicitors to make that decision for us.
Okay. Councillor Plowman, then Councillor Taylor, then Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I totally concur with Councillor Arthur. There's a lot of loose ends here and it concerns me, and I've been hearing some concerns from the local community about this because it's now public information, so I think this is going in the best direction. I will however ask, it says the Gatlin's report, would that have a reference number? Because you know what I mean, it just says Gatlin's report, what Gatlin's report? Is that
Galvin.
Galvin?
Yeah, sorry. Yes,
You know what I'm coming
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. Full title, it will be inserted if I, but it is the report from the March minute. If you're on that subject at this stage, Councillor, you completed, Councillor. Yes, and Councillor Taylor.
What is the risk council of doing nothing?
Well, it was no different than the previous thing, I believe. The risk of councillors, it's all of us as public officers, and particularly me, is that we are going to report that identifies there may be some financial whatevers, and we don't act, we could be liable. That's what I've observed in this business for some while. With people that don't act are often in more trouble than people that acted in a different way. So I believe we need to take some action, or this action to be fine. But that's what my thoughts are. Councillor Hill, sorry.
Oh, I was just wondering whether this is a bit premature without seeking some clarification now over some of the items. And is the total amount in question, is the cost of pursuing it higher than the value of pursuing it?
So Councillor Roundtree, apart from this motion at the top, has also then got a series of questions that I would suggest you've covered in that.
Yeah.
They're questions that we also need answers to.
Yeah.
So as a way forward, I would recommend that if the chamber is wanting to refer it on, I probably would suggest you don't need, or we don't need to go to the solicitors. This would be something, but the motion with all the questions on it, we would do first, and then it would be referred to OB as a more final product. Those questions were the obvious ones that Councillor Roundtree said. OB will do one of two things. They will, and I'm not going to speak on or predict, but they will look at it and say that in the light of the Auditor General's report, most of the things have been fixed. There are still some outstanding, they won't say significant or otherwise, they'll just say there's outstanding issues. they may want to address them depending on how they see them, or they'll refer them back to council to deal with them. So in a sense that's unknown, but OB is the first protocol. Unless the governance office thinks otherwise, I don't think referring it to a solicitor in the first instance for that cost would be warranted.
Councillor Bland.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think probably our CEO has indicated fairly much what I was going to say. The cost of the solicitor, which we haven't seen over the past 12 months yet, the amount of money we've spent on solicitors, I would like to see that at some point soon. But to go a little prematurely to a solicitor to get the advice that we should go through OP without actually having yet gone through the list. We haven't yet seen Councillor Roundtree's second motion, and therefore I feel a bit premature to vote on this one until we had that up. And I find that perhaps a little bit difficult given what the CEO has just indicated.
With Councillor Roundtree permission, I'll read the what would have been another motion, which is more helps dealing with the piece by piece. So this is the questions that perhaps this report raises. What mechanism is required to allow a councillor to use his or her allowance to cover their rate obligations? Clarification is sought as to the nature of the waste dumping arrangements. Did the waste dumping arrangement go through council's procurement procedure? How was the Yench land selected to be the recipient of this waste? How long has this arrangement been in place? Is this arrangement required to be declared on ordinary returns, and were or are the appropriate EPA and any other licences and permits in place to allow for dumping of effluent waste? The next point, did Councillor Yench breach the motor vehicle policy applicable during his time as mayor? And if so, what is the consequence of any breach? Next point, explanation of the $83 a month mayoral admin fee. Why was this fee not included in the elected members' allowance policy and is continuing? Next point, what is the nature of the $1,000 reimbursement to council for the phone internet of $1,000? Does this have anything to do with the former Internode arrangements? Further explanation to why Councillor Yench in some instances only repaid 50% of the costs incurred by his spouse and in other cases 100%. And the last point on this is what was the nature of the purchase for the value of $244.50 at the Canberra Casino on the 19th of June 2016. They are that list of questions as that councillor would move in another motion.
Yes, Mr Mayor, well I think that going to the solicitor prior to having had a look at some of those questions, and I have some concern because those questions now are in the public arena and we haven't yet even attempted to address them to be able to give an answer. So before anything really can be done is the council itself needs to give some answers. I can't answer some of those. I would assume, which may be wrong, because we don't, every contract that council enters into, such as waste management, etc. So I would also suggest that some of the things like the 244 was probably meals at a Canberra conference. What that included, I cannot, I think it was 2016, exactly tell you, but I would imagine that some of that information can come to light without spending thousands and thousands of dollars on a solicitor. We already have significant costs. So I will not be voting for the first motion, but will consider the second.
Well, the second is not a motion. That was asked to
Should
raise
be
points. Councillor Roundtree on a point of order or a point of process, or
just to, through you, Mr Mayor, I just would like to respond to Councillor Bland through you. Or actually, I have two questions.
make a question.
Yeah. The report suggests in some of the wording that Councillor Yench was given the opportunity to provide information. Can you confirm whether he was given that opportunity?
To you, Mayor, those comments relate to the time when those transactions actually took place. So no, the Calpins didn't, at this point in time, they were asked to look at the motion and do a audit, desktop audit. It wasn't about interviewing of the people involved.
Thank you. And my first motion actually relates more closely to the fuel usage, which I think is quite indisputable when you compare that to what was declared on the reports of where I went. So from that perspective, if you separate, that's why I wrote them two separately. The first one really relates to, I think, very much a misuse of the council card and a misuse of
Alleged misuse.
oh, not sorry. It relates to the use of the fuel in the car. And I think that in itself becomes a different situation because Galpins have already investigated that and found that information out. All I've done is convert it into kilometres, matched it to diary records of where the mayor was travelling and found anomalies. And I think that's very clear cut. And that is probably something that the solicitor could take a view on as opposed to the rest of the questions that need to be answered.
So again, away from the question, I have to say. Okay. Does anyone other councillor wish to speak to this motion without notice? Does any councillor wish to move an amendment to this motion?
No, Mr. Mayor, I believe this is the way to go to.
You're the second, eh?
Yeah, as a seconder, I believe that we do need to get some information from solicitors about this job because it's not a simple situation here.
So I'm taking there's no amendment.
Through Mr. Mayor, should I clarify in the motion to regards
Very
to
close
fuel?
close and vote.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to see included
Question.
question. I would like to see that if possible, that we include that prior to going to a solicitor, after the CEO has done some investigation.
So you want to work your words as an amendment, councillors?
I think that might be going reading as an amendment to the original motion. That we have a point that talks about the CEO doing a preliminary investigation, as she has indicated she has not done so as yet, has not had the time, prior to any money being spent on a solicitor. And come back to us first.
So she indicated there's nothing about time.
So, through you, Mayor, Councillor Bland, it wasn't about time. The motion was that we do a report, and then the motion doesn't say pause, but this was a pause to say, what is the appetite in the chamber to spend more money? Was there sufficient information there to either, as Councillor Taylor's first question was, what's the risk of doing nothing, or does the chamber want to pursue further activity around this? So it was more about pausing to say we've spent 16,000. Now, from the chamber's perspective, what do you want me to do next? So we could have done that quite easily, but it was about the, I suppose, the appetite of the chamber to spend more money on the next step. Because if I'd done that and you come along and said, no, we're not going to do anything with it, which is to the essence of Councillor Taylor's comments, then we've spent money unwisely or without the endorsement of the chamber. So it was about pausing, not about time.
I accept that. I still believe that it would be in our best interest for the CEO to have a preliminary look at the information she's been given and discussion with the previous mayor to ascertain any further clarification, given that government hasn't done that, before we go off and spend ratepayers' money on the next step. This next step may still have to happen, and I accept that.
So councillor, I'm looking for you moving an amendment or I'm going to take it as a question.
Should we put my second motion up through Mr. Mayor and maybe
I
that
can't
might
have two motions.
clarify?
So, Deb, so just a bit of process advice, please.
I'm just wondering if the mover, Councillor Roundtree, with the permission of the seconder, is interested in a variation to the motion, because it won't, what I'm suggesting won't change the intent of what you're after. And remembering that council is about saving money and efficiencies, etc. So I'm wondering if you'd be interested in removing the going to council solicitors, because in my view, I'm not sure what that would achieve when the same information could be sent direct to OPI and save council potentially an unnecessary cost. If OPI have any concerns, they will get back to us and tell us what we need to do. So I'm just trying to think of efficiencies and cost savings, but still achieve what you're trying to achieve, Councillor Roundtree and Councillor Arthur.
And my question, Mr Mayor, if I may question, then that would also resolve your concerns and other councillors' concerns around what is required of council in relation to sitting on information.
It's public knowledge.
Partly.
So
Councillor Roundtree.
I understand what you're saying through you, Mr Mayor. Could we then add in perhaps into this motion, the second motion I was going to put in, only because I think I would like to see the council answer all those questions and present all of that to OPI, because that's, the devil is in that detail, and I think all of that needs to be done in order to give them the full picture.
That could be done. So you're the mover. So with approval of the seconder, you can do a variation, and it would be, and the risk of directing on what to say.
Well, I've got the second one goes into the detail that I thought council needed to deal with. If we could bring that into the first one, you could do it almost in two parts and say, part A is we do this investigation, part B is then we send the findings to OPI.
With these questions, yeah. So refer the matters with the Galpin's report, blah, 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 to OPI for, what did I say previously? Review and recommendation.
So it's not
With
only
the
the
following
Galpin's,
questions.
yeah, it's not only the Galpin's report, it's also, I think, the Galpin's report raises a lot of questions, and I think those questions need to be answered, and that the fuel situation really does need closer investigation, because I just don't think that was an acceptable issue.
So
So that can be with this.
I've come to the view that unless the mover and seconder are prepared to move on the motion, it will be put up as it is, unless you're prepared to move around the solicitor-ish piece.
So that can
Yes, I am
sit
prepared to
meeting.
move around the solicitor piece, yes.
Mover and seconder can seek leave of meeting to make the variation.
So I ask you,
Make the variation.
seek leave of
Yes,
meeting to
please,
do
to make a
that.
variation.
So yes, they agree to seek leave of the meeting to make a variation, and that will be move it. We need to word this along with the government's office.
The chamber agrees to seek the leave of meeting.
Yeah. That part, no, the best next part.
You read it out.
Between the council to OPI rather than the council solicitors for their review and recommendations or assessment, if you're happy with that. The following questions to be included,
Yes.
to be presented to OPI.
I think it's important that if OPI get the report, they get to see the council's response.
To you, Mayor, because they'll come back and ask the same question.
Yeah, so you might as well be on front foot at the same time and just provide extra detail.
Sure.
Could we see the questions up on as a full motion?
So through you, Mayor.
So-
it'll take a couple of minutes.
So, councillors, I'd like to take the opportunity right now to adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes, because it will take a little bit of time for that to be printed up. So 5 minutes from 3:45, councillors, I just adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes.
Councillor Roundtree, you got another, Councillor Roundtree, and you got another copy?
On that motion.
So,
Yeah, I'm not sure what you were talking about.
Sorry, go back.
And it's not with it's not with it. Because the where the driveway is. Wasn't right here, but the security guards in Malaysia,
Well, I suppose they can do that, list the session, list the sub-base.
I think my levels up. Someone give me a signal.
Thanks, Anna.
The amount of expansion that was unbelievable. Yeah. Yeah, that's just so well, you know. Yeah. And the other thing, realistically, it's not a big chance. Not easy, not cheap.
You know what Abbey stories?
Oh, yeah. It's only a bridge. Oh, I tell them. Yeah. That's it's hard. I've noticed, I know you come in a few. I just see. Yes. Yeah, well, I know. So I put that up. Oh, it's all just for 2 weeks ago, or we can get on what's into their needs. We just have a repression.
Sorry?
You were having a school. What's it here?
Hang on, Don. 5 minutes is a long, short time. Hang on. That's all right. So, What? Just going to extend the starting time for a minute or two more because the first Ash needs a break. While we're just waiting, just thank everyone that was involved in the Councillor Arthur. I think everyone was involved in the opening of the fixed floating pontoon. I think I got that right. You know, quite well, I trust. And we've received some very good photos. I think you probably all received them around boats tying up to the fixed floating.
We got our second paddle wheeler come in last week. Challenge a brand new vessel coming out from Endura down at Goulburn. Beautiful vessel.
So, yeah, the weather was still fine.
Mr. Mayor, I was going to ask you that very question. What made you brought up about the opening of the floating?
Well, sorry I didn't elaborate on my report, but
I thought it was a very successful.
Geraldine Dixon was there. You would know as an old cohort of
Mr. Weber, husband.
Yeah, with Peter. Peter, that was one of his visions I can remember. 25 years ago. So
Peter had a lot of it.
Showing your age, mate.
So that was that. So we're not actually starting the meeting because I'm waiting for Ashley to come back. So anything else? A good-natured discussion.
Do you want to remove internet from?
No, I'm waiting till Ashley comes back before we do anything. And I went last Friday to Unity College for the opening of their agricultural centre, which was all very nice.
Is this a show, part of the show?
No, they've received some money from the state and some benefactors to build buildings. They don't have to walk away from the ag centre. I saw the back end of the parade of the sheep and the goats and the cows and the. So of course this year they can't.
Yes, so that's
It's quite disappointing for the kids, but the school's moving into, it's, a good thing that agricultural area we have some agriculture, basically. What else? What else good news have we got? The Canalton pool is probably on track. Steve's got that look of, I hope so, in his head.
Discussed this morning, so.
Discuss them, will we be able to meet, we'll be able to meet the time frames of the grant, won't we?
That's the intent.
Intent. So from council's point of view, that means that the opening of the pool season might be relatively into December. So we'll discuss that with Jim, the committee, Sue Micken. I raised it with her at a CFS meeting last week, and she said, well, 50 years, that's the price to pay of getting the pool rebuilt. It's probably a small price.
That's good. We still haven't got the final results of the core sample, but the preliminary results paid for.
Core samples for what? Just
The bottom of the pool to see what the integrity of the concrete is done.
You're in hospital that day, we had our tour of council, and course after working that day on the pool tub.
What they bringing up, Simon?
No, they're just core samples to see if there's any deterioration of the.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure why that takes so long, but they've New South Wales. New South Wales? Brisbane.
Brisbane.
Somewhere on the east coast.
We'll resume the meeting at 3:55 PM, please. We have a large addition to that motion, which is an enhancement of it, so it's not really any problem with that. Councillors, can you see all that on your screens?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, can I add one extra line in, please?
You're the mover, so I think you can.
Can we just please actually add in the double up of fuel purchases? Is that was probably going to be captured in the original anyway. And the vast anomaly of fuel purchases versus official travel.
Word that exactly, please.
Double up of fuel purchases and vast anomalies of fuel in fuel purchases compared to official or declared travel.
Okay. So,
The last one.
yes,
I would question the need to have a reference to, is it gone? No,
to what?
internet.
It's also gone.
It's all gone, well done. And I would like some clarification around the contracts for the waste dumping arrangement, because that probably was a private arrangement. I would like a time frame on that, particularly in relation to what the rules were at that point. Rules for EPA change over time, and I don't know whether this sits back 1 year or 15 years. So it may be a little bit tricky.
Well, the EPA is not a tricky organisation, Councillor.
No, we won't.
So without more time with the relevant officer, we won't be able to give you an answer.
Say that again.
Without more time with the relevant officer who is not here today, we
Right.
won't be able to give you any answer on that right now.
I'm just wondering if it covers or is covering the intent of, and that particular time frame. Some things were pretty loose probably a long time ago, may have got tightened up or may not have got tightened up, I don't know.
So the issue there may be as council in a awkward position if it was our waste dumped on someone's land without a permit. That's the issue.
Yes,
We
so
would need to
again,
turn ourselves to.
another problem
It's not
that,
our waste.
Could it be that, was it in line with council's practices of the time?
yes, that's, yeah, good, that's exactly what I was
I
thinking.
think it's all coming.
Whether-
Right.
whether we would consider-
I don't know if she does. I won't look at the mover and seconder if they want to change anything more.
So what, I don't understand what the word is. that's being-
It's around the effluent waste dumping on the land.
So what we can add in after the word procedure then is print of the date, is that of the date?
I think the practices of the time the CEO mentioned is probably appropriate, same thing. But
Righto, councillors. I think we've had a fair bit of process here. The mover and seconder, they will eventually close the vote, and I'm at that point. I'm happy with it.
I close debate.
Okay, so it's a very large motion, councillors, which you can see on the screen. It's a motion without notice. So, there's no further clarifications required. There being none, I will put that motion. All those in favour? Those against, that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Can someone, is that the finish of that subject? Sorry, just. Is everyone happy that that process is finished before Councillor Yench is brought back to the chamber? Yep. Okay. We move in a second. Oh. Scaffolding. Yeah, I know. See, it's not to do. I know.
You're suggesting, Bridget, that each of these 7 points here will be a separate motion. Is that what it says there? Each recommendation will be moved separately.
I'm on item 3.
Item 3, Councillor?
Item 3, Councillor. Murray Darling Association 2020 National Conference annual general meeting. It's going to be by Zoom, by remote method. There's a recommendation there that they attend the conference, but they actually don't attend the conference.
I would move that councillor Hill.
And I'll second that one.
Do you want Councillor Hill in that recommendation?
But she's an official, then she could be going me. Absolutely. And I think I might sneak in and just listen in the background. I never said that.
Yes, you did. So, if, I'll take it the people are going to attend. There might be a public forum, who knows? The councillor, so item 1 was the attendance of Councillor Hill at the Murray Darling MDA conference. Delegates himself want to go, speak out now, and appoint CEO as council voting delegate at the 2020 Murray Darling Association AGM. Bridget, perhaps you can explain your role in the MDA then, please.
So, I'm on the executive committee, and thank you, I'm not sure about that. And in my uninformed wisdom, I thought I just was automatically that person, and so that's why it shows there. Until Councillor Legg reminded me when we were at a meeting that that's not an automatic thing. So I have no preference one way or the other. It was more my confusion about being on the executive, so I automatically assumed that other things were my responsibility, which appears they're not. So I don't mind if somebody else likes to be the voting delegate. It's up to the chamber.
Through Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Oh, you're the mover.
I am.
You're happy with the motion? CEO to be the voting delegate. Right. Councillor Roundtree, put you down as a second. It was. Is there any further debate, discussion about this? Councillors Hill, Lang and Taylor in that order.
So 3 minutes. I did notice the second day of the conference is actually a scheduled council meeting.
Yes.
But it is at 6 o'clock. Is that correct?
So you're looking at this meeting, this organisation.
It's a council meeting.
So
Meets on the Tuesday of the conference. But I noticed that in the calendar it says 6 o'clock meeting. Is that
So it is a 2.5-day conference, and as the delegate, and I'll say this with the streaming on, if you have the stamina to sit through 2.5-day streaming, I would say well done. They've set out the agenda fairly well, so there are opportunities, I think, to look at which ones would be most relevant to this district for you to choose. And then you're right, it does may overlap the council meeting depending on what time it goes that day.
And there's also briefing for Tuesday as well.
Councillor Lang.
I just advise people from the last MDA meeting, the Murray Bridge Hall has been offered by the Murray Bridge Council through the Mayor. So there is an open invitation for everyone to attend on the to view the big screen. Presume Murray Bridge Council will be hosting. There is a fee, and I think it's $175 for people to participate and listen to the speakers, even though it is on video. There is a big saving to the MDA itself because it's not actually having to cater or pay for the travel of all those speakers and accommodation. So, yeah.
So what you're saying is a publicly accessible way of watching this is Murray Bridge.
And you don't, on this occasion, you don't need to be a regional representative or a delegate. Every council member here could, if they wish, attend, having paid the appropriate fees.
Okay.
I think there is a joint 10-member special deal.
Councillor Taylor.
Through your motions, it would be nice to know, rather than spending the $175 per delegate, if there is any intention to record the sessions so that post-conference they could be listened to.
We can follow that up, councillor. I would be surprised if it wasn't recorded because most of the webinars of this size, generally the guest speakers are recorded in some way. Generally they're only available but to people who pay the money. But we'll check out what the actual details are.
Okay. No further questions, you will close the vote, councillor Wade.
Aye.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Item 4, LAP committee membership. Councillor Roundtree was nominated last meeting. You're going to explain that, councillor Roundtree, your position is that we get a hand up for.
Two things, that and to your motion.
Right.
And to nominate.
Right. Well, explain why you feel you should not be first.
It isn't going to be a conflict, but I still feel that it's probably going to be an easier position for myself than not. There, I understood at the last meeting, Councillor Arthur was also interested in the position, so I would like to nominate Councillor Arthur as the LAP committee member.
I'd like to second that.
Nominations, do they require seconders? Again, this process, they do.
Yes, I am.
Councillor, so this is we need if we need to have an election, we need to deal with recommendation 1. Is that how this works? So is there any other nominees for this position?
Yes,
Councillor Hill.
I'd like to nominate.
Right. Is there a second? Councillor Lang. So at this point, no, I will finish. Is there anyone else now that there will be an election wishing to vote? Be nominated or wishing to nominate someone else? Okay, we need to go through recommendation 1, and each item of those 7 need to be moved. One recommendation, right? So that's recommendation 1. Could someone move, since we need an election, someone move recommendation 1, please? Councillors Taylor and Hill. Any discussion? There being none, put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. So we go through the process of the election as per adoption. Secret ballot councillors. Preferential method of voting, but this will simply be quite simple in this respect. Do I have to? Mayor shall be included in the vote, first item. I'm just thinking about it. I declare councillor Arthur to be the winner of that vote. Could no one move recommendation 2 with that insert, please? I'm going with councillor Coleman and councillor Ling on this case. There's too many arms in the air. Can't be any discussion realistically. All those in favour? Those against? Carried unanimously. Move on to Code of Conduct Report. Item 5, there is a recommendation, councillors. Councillor Taylor and Councillor Hill. Councillor Taylor, you wish to say anything? Councillor Hill, any other councillors? For everyone's benefit, if the person who the complaint's been made against wishes to have it made public that there was a code of conduct complaint made once it is completed fully, it will be, if they want to, in the public agenda. If a code of conduct is successful, it will automatically be in the council agenda in the available meeting. There's been no further debate. Closed, thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Carried unanimously. We would note that that process does not come without a cost. Council, where are we going to? Council, council policies, community grants, policy and procedure. The recommendation, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Roundtree.
Mr. Mayor, just before we go on that.
A question.
Item 19, regard of the terms and conditions regarding Star Club, that was to be removed.
What page?
Full page. Page 2, right at the bottom.
2 of 8. Star Club.
2 of 8, yeah.
Yes, that was then in the discussion.
Representative proposed in the last meeting that we.
That will be removed, that process. Any questions, councillors, about this renewed process, I'll call it?
I think we need to try it. We've done nothing last year, and I think it's a good way to start, and tweak it if we need to in the next 12 months. At the end of the full process.
See how we go again. Thank you. There's no further discussion. Rules again. Closed. I put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Coorong Infrastructure and Assets Committee, the minutes of the meeting of 28th of July. Councillor Bland, you moving or questioning?
No, I'm moving.
Thank you. Councillor Corman, the seconder. Is there any discussion around those minutes?
I've just got one question.
So the chair, yes.
On page 5, we've got a resume of costs. Coorong Council total expenditure $515,000, and then we go down to the bottom and to get our $1.5 million we spent, it becomes $655,497, which is correct because it does affect the cost per kilometre. If it is $655,000 spent by the council, the cost per kilometre goes up to about $59,000.
So the question is in the bottom box or graph, the figure is growing to $655,497,
yep.
Whereas in the average Using the total expenditure in the top box, it's $515,010.
That's exactly right.
Is that because the colours are painted or something?
No idea.
In the bottom box?
Yes, it has changed.
But that's just when,
12.2.
you know, the contractor against the council.
Relativity has
So
changed.
I wonder if we could just check that in an answer.
So in moving the minutes, it'll be subject to clarification around a anomaly that you've identified. Councillor, I can see that. Anything else? Being none. We close, councillor. Thank you. Put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Maryland Riverland Local Government Association annual meeting on the 10th of July. I think that was at Karoonda. Peter Hunt continues as our president. Dave Burgess is the deputy. We had a meeting with just the council mayors and the council support staff. Everyone else was Zooming. Councillor Roundtree. Move the recommendation. Councillors Roundtree and Hill, thank you. Any discussion? If none, closed. Right, put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? It is carried unanimously. Corporate and Community Report is a delegation update for the Fire and Emergency Services Act of 2005. Councillor Leng's moving and Councillor Roundtree seconding, I think. Any discussion, councillors? Just procedural?
Question. In how that information in relation to then the delegated officer, who the CEO delegate goes out to the community. Put in the newsletters. We can do that. I think they probably.
So this delegated authority under a provision of an act, isn't it?
No, not the CEO's side of it, to whom she's subject to delegate, so I think the word is
So we can do that now.
Yeah.
It's just letting the community know who that responsible person will be. Make an assumption it's the same thing happening.
Okay. Any other discussion? Thank you. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. South Australian Public Health Act, item 2.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Yance, you're moving it in total.
Yes.
You. Rushme. Councillor Roundtree is the seconder. Any discussion required? Being none, I put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Delegations, Planning, Development and Infrastructure Act, number 3. Councillor Hill. Councillor Taylor. Any discussion, councillors, around that? Being none, thank you for the motion. All those in favour, Councillor Bland.
Sorry.
Oh, I've asked you to shift that hand away a little bit. The tangerine was easier.
I promised we're in.
Anyone against? Didn't say it better. That's carried unanimously. Item 4, delegations update to the new Landscapes SA Act and Landscape South Australia General Regulations. Councillor Taylor. Councillor Arthur. The recommendation in totality. Is there any discussion? Being none, I will put the motion. All those in favour? Those against, that's carried unanimously. Number 5, excuse me.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Jens moves number 5, which is the Buildings Fire Safety Committee transition. And voice, Councillor Hill is the second. Any discussion around that? It's good to see we've still got a bushfire. It's not this is a building safety. This is a statutory committee we must have. Isn't it? Thank you. Any discussion around that? There is none. Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? It's carried unanimously. Include the terms of reference, as you note there. Motion without notice. We're over. Number 14, infrastructure and assets report. Motion without notice. The recommendation there, councillors, Councillor Arthur. Item 1 of 14, report 14. Councillor Coleman is the seconder. Any discussion around that motion? There is none. Motion. I will put the motion. All those in favour? Councillor Laney, you. So I'm not trying to force you to vote a certain way. But
If you must.
I sort of no.
Yeah.
Those against. As long as
I was there.
no. Could have said, "Are you going to vote?" Number 2. It was unanimous. I wrote a big U on my page. That was. Number 2 is unsealed roads reshedding program, which is, where's that gone? Off my page anyway. Councillors, Councillor Roundtree, you're moving.
I'd like to put an amendment or a new motion.
Well, you've got the floor, so you
Well,
do whatever you do.
I think this one should be referred to the infrastructure and assets committee.
This program, this is the priority roads for reshedding.
Under the unsealed roads reshedding program.
You feel,
Well,
well, that's fine.
I wasn't sure how to proceed with it, like we only got the information.
So,
I don't know
so
what to do with it.
I'd only indicate this, for no other reason. That would delay the process of us starting the work.
Would it?
And I'm looking at the key chairman of the committee, and I'm not sure the next committee meeting is. That's the only reason I asked.
Then if you can, would it? Okay. I'll withdraw.
A lot of these were discussed,
Yeah.
but it wasn't presented to us.
I just
And
was
I-
confused by that one, sorry.
It's all right. It's just, it has been the sort of the best
All right.
compromises in terms of getting the worst roads done, and that's all I'd indicate is it could
All
take
right.
too much time not to. You can still move if you want to
No,
move the recommendation.
No, I trust my fellow councillors who all seem to be more aware of what's
Councillor
going on.
Arthur is the mover. Councillor Bland is the seconder.
I just have one question, which I'd like the CEO to ratify for us later. We spent 1.542 million last year. We budgeted 1.361 million here, but we got 1.457 in the budget. So why has the $200,000 or $100,000, nearly $200,000 been left off the expenditure?
Was this stage prioritised?
Yeah.
Maybe just so you believe you don't have to spend it all. There'll be something that will come up in a priority, councillor, no doubt, to do that.
Yeah, but the reason I asked that is because there's a lot of reshedding work that goes on, which actually goes on under maintenance. So if you look at reshedding last year, they did firstly nil on Carcooma Road, but they were out there all the time. They did nil on the end of Frost Road, but they didn't want it.
So it's probably, probably best for the committee to consider the exact line between construction and maintenance, and this priorities here actually include, in my view, what I personally think is merely maintenance, anyway. We'll deal with that perhaps by the committee and other roads that we think could be added later, whatever happened or that, but I would hope that in the future we can actually have this process done in about May of this year, because it takes a lot of time to get the pitch established. Yeah, in this contingency, and it'd be easier from a construction and maintenance. I'm looking at the acting manager down the back, if we had the decision made a a couple of months ago. We just need to bring that process forward each year. Get it. It's at the end of the day, it's an ongoing. Councillors, any discussion around that process, councillors?
Need to get on with the roads.
You're driving the great or the roller, councillor?
Whichever way you're not.
Very good answer. You'll close the vote, councillor Arthur. Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. I move to Fleet and Asset Management Plan, councillors. Councillor Kwong, moving that way.
First of all, question, Mr. Mayor. It says in the recommendation, Fleet and Asset Management Plan report and recommendation will be circulated to council members and placed on the council website under separate cover. Is that what I interpret as a late item?
Well, I think it, I haven't had enough time to read it. I think it basically is a late item. So.
Yeah.
It was a late item, councillor.
Yeah, I had concerns that not enough time to digest it, and I request that we defer it to a workshop.
A workshop or a meeting?
1st of September.
Or for otherwise our first INA meeting, which is not till.
So you'd like it referred to? We have had a workshop on the board since it goes.
Yeah, we've got a workshop on the 1st of September.
Yeah, but do you want it a workshop or an INA, man?
Well, if you want to adopt them now, you can have a special meeting on the 1st of September
We've already got a
process this.
Well, I might speak. I think there's more work needs to be done. Quite honest.
Yeah.
Well, the board and I haven't had enough time to think about it either, and so I'd like a bit of time to consider it. I probably personally believe meeting's the best place to handle it. It's an INA issue, it's an asset. It's a liability perhaps some days.
Yeah, I spent considerable time yesterday going through the finance budget and also this, which for me, you put the both together, it's a pretty big thing. And then this, I didn't have time to even look at this, and I'll be quite honest. So I was like voting on it anyway.
Yeah, so one of my concerns in quickly reading it is we appeared at the end of the day, it appeared because I couldn't sort of digest it enough, is that we were still treating all assets as if they were under a sort of a fairly standard regime in this council. We have some plant and equipment that does an extreme amount of work by local government standards, and some that does virtually none, but because of our geography we require. So I think we probably need to do more work. So, Councillor Kwong, you have the floor. Are you referring it to which committee?
Well, I think it should go. Now thinking about it more, Mr. Mayor, the next upcoming INA meeting, construction management.
Someone's pointing there over you, Councillor Ling, because I wouldn't want.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did have time to read some of the report this morning. But before it goes to the next meeting, can I suggest that report be vetted thoroughly? It is shocking as far as grammar and punctuation, and it made it very difficult to read. It's got too many grammatical errors and spelling. Punctuation.
Okay, we take that on board.
Thank you.
Sorry, I've got a second for Councillor Kwong's motion, Councillor Roundtree. Is there any discussion around that rather weighty document? Once again, I remind councillors and public out there that the surplus assets are on the auction block right now. Council's depot with a company doing an online auction. So we'll start with a bit clean slate. Any further discussion? Close. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Unanimously, sorry. Right. Best document is item 15 is information document. Is that correct? Councillors, what is in the information document? Councillor, I'll start with Councillor Roundtree. I don't know what you're doing, Councillor, after with your hand.
On the serious matter of the CEO report, I just wanted to get some clarification around the visit on the 22nd of July. It was meeting with TSM Consulting regarding the Maniki Master Plan. Two questions. I did a bit of Googling on who TSM are. So were they appointed? Who made the decision? and considering comments today about undertaking costs of undertaking feasibility studies, has any cost been put around what this community master plan will cost?
So the first question is nobody has been appointed yet. We did some preliminary discussions. It's a consulting firm that we've used for other things, and they are one of those firms that also is quite good at looking at grants, particular things, and does quite a lot of work across South Australia. And the meetings would be described as preliminary. We are nowhere near a master plan situation. It is more about, we started off talking about a master plan for Menindee, which we had that discussion in this chamber a few times. We've now moved to looking at what is the best outcome for Whatmore House in the first instance. And this is where their recommendation is that we start with the community engagement, which will make Councillor Glenn happy. And what needs to happen in terms of the assessment of that building before we can even decide what we can use it for from a community perspective. So it's very early days and nobody has been appointed.
Have we paid any money previously? Have we paid any money and the costing us anything so far?
No, we think, I don't think we know that preliminary discussion with them will be about $5,000, and we had some money put aside for getting project shovel ready, so that will be used for that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I might, Bridget, I think the word Menindee master plan is probably a little misleading.
We can change that.
If we have changed the title, I think that sends up all sorts of red flags. It isn't quite what it's meant to be, no, it sounds.
I think the three major school was it is an investigation into the Whatmore House usage of Whatmore House. So that's what we've agreed to.
Yes, Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the chair to the CEO. On the 14th of August with the meeting with the Carlin Bend Hospital Director of Emergency Neighbourhood and Infrastructure Matters, we are clearing of native vegetation in Carlin Bend. It's been an ongoing issue with the HAC committee. Can the CEO please enlighten me, because disappointingly I wasn't asked to come along.
So that was really a catch-up, Councillor Coleman, about how far they've got with the discussions with up their line to getting the clearing of the top, and not the clearing, but the cleaning of it in terms of removing vegetation that shouldn't have been there. They still haven't got information back down the line from their head office. And so we left the discussion with just saying once they get those quotes from, then we'll come back and talk to them, because as you'll remember when we first spoke with them, with Sue Nagel, we said that if they could organise through their means, and it's not our land, it is their land, Dipti have a responsibility to state health to do that clearing. Where were they up to with that? They were pursuing it, and once they get the information, we'll then come back to the table and see what else we can, from a council perspective, maybe do to keep it clean once the heavy lifting's been done.
Another question, thank you. Mr. Mayor, through the chair to the CEO again. I sent an email back in July regarding a question regarding the road shoulder widening of Narung Road, and the CEO informed me that it would be in July's information document. It wasn't, and I see it's not in the August information document. I know David's not here.
I apologise for that. That is an oversight. I will get the information. I'm sorry.
Thank you. That's all, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
Visit to National Railway Museum, rail tourism opportunity.
So we had started a conversation through your chair.
Oh, absolutely. What are we going to do about it?
We started a conversation with the facility down, I remember the name on, I've got the Roundhouse, to see what was there, what was the land tenure. It's a complicated process and it's a commercial operation. We also had heard that the National Rail Museum was busting at the seams and was looking for alternatives in terms of where they may store or expand into. So we thought it would be a good opportunity to just go down there and have a look at what they've got, have a chat with them to see what their long-term plans were. Did it fit with Carlin Bend? Were they thinking of anything from Carlin Bend? They did mention they were looking at Petersburg. Peterborough, thank you. We told them Carlin Bend is much better, but we're going to have a follow-up discussion with them Mr. Sampson, and we're currently in the process of doing that. He's coming to see us, and then we will also have a chat with Stephen Ritz again from the Roundhouse just to see what the opportunities are. I sent you all a note immediately following that visit where I'd like to say I put to bed the urban myth that the carriage that we have at the depot, which is falling apart at the seams, and had a beautiful story that it royalty had written in it, and it doesn't appear to be the case, which I think is probably disappointing to some people, but it was fairly, Mr. Sampson was fairly adamant when we told him that story and he hadn't heard it. The alarm bells went off my head, given his knowledge about them. So we will remove that carriage now because it is really a safety hazard and but we think that there is opportunities for some other railway carriages that he has. One is Bluebird that apparently has a strong connection with Carmen Ben. It's really, I was going to say, it's registered at his facility. It's parked there, it's privately owned. He doesn't know the intentions of the people who own it, but it was something that he said would have a great connection with Carmen Ben if we wanted to have anything to do with railway carriages. So it's really just exploring what's going on with all these railway carriages, and the next ones I'm going to ask about are the ones across the road that we apparently own as well, or the ownership is a little unclear with some of them. What possibility we could have with those rather than letting them just either fall down around our ears, or if they're of no significance, then we move them on so that we have some safety around the other side of the track. It's just the start of the conversation.
Councillor Gorman again.
If I may do a comment on rail-related history, please, Mr. Mayor.
I think we can do that.
Yeah, back in 2015, you might have seen a YouTube of involved with naming of locomotive 701 Carlin Ben, and that is now surplus to requirement. It did often work down here on freight trains and surplus.
Did you spend any time in it, Councillor?
Sorry?
You ever drive?
Yes, I drove it down.
You drove it on the day of the
yeah, the naming of Carlin Ben.
Yeah.
And,
oh, very good.
It's surplus to requirement, so just one day is something to think about. Council, we might have get it off of one rail for a very cheap price. And I haven't got my locomotive licence anymore, so I can't drive it here, but we could get it down there.
Sure.
Where is it actually? Where is it now? Where is it actually now?
It's in Drycote. Yeah, so it's so basically.
Councillor, if you could probably transmit that information, perhaps you never know how lucky I might. I don't know what its value is when they do what they usually do to locomotives is, but so much per tonne.
During this mayor, you were involved in the tractor course, weren't you? So maybe you should do a training course. I remember the day.
No, I never lost the traffic course. It's quite the amount of refreshments.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Oh. Any other councillors want some information? You should have the information document.
Yeah.
So, Councillor Radcliffe.
So, under community and corporate, page 57 of the document, so the telephone review said there were potential efficiencies and cost savings that were identified, and the reference to some business systems. I just wanted a bit more information on what those efficiencies and cost savings might have been and what business systems they.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we're working on getting a full report to you, so we're just letting you know that there's some savings made, and then we're working on getting a full report to council to explain the associated savings.
Anything else, councillors?
Is draft meeting signing on this or is that?
That's in this document,
Okay,
yes.
so I have two questions for you, Mr. Mayor. The status of the replacement playground at Keeping District's netball club. Any update on that?
Through you, Mayor. I can answer a little bit of that, councillor, but I need the rest of it.
Okay, well, I'm happy to wait, take one notice. And I think you've answered the second one perhaps, and that was before we open in time for the 2020 season, and we already said it might be December. Yeah.
It's a realistic assessment of what's in front of us, councillor, but
Yeah.
for the constraints of the announcements of the funding, I think we still have a good result. Councillor Taylor.
Through you, residents to Director in corporate is Taylor Petrol Station and Rail Museum. says that, we consider recruitment, training and induction of new volunteers. The old volunteers have all, what?
My understanding is many of them have the COVID kind of made them, that's our understanding, but we're going to go on a recruiting drive, so to speak.
Until you met, the volunteers just before COVID were starting to diminish as well. So COVID then came along and basically, yeah. So we'll have to have a fresh look at the people who are interested.
Anything else on the information document? There being none, that finishes the open part of the meeting. Best I can see, councillors. So, for those watching the live stream, please be advised the meeting is about to move into confidence and the live stream will stop. For those who wish to view the end of the meeting, the video will be uploaded to YouTube, not you, YouTube 1 hour after today's meeting. We need to get our IT person, so I'm going to stop the meeting, and that's, I've said that, we're going to hold the meeting for a second while we deal with that before we move into confidence, councillors. So get ready for that. Thank you, everyone.
Which one? It could be anywhere. Tip to toe. Oh dear.